Good evening. This is Vikstrand talking to you, and I am going to inform you that the review you were about to see was the first I had shot in well over 8 months. And I'm going to apologize a little bit ahead because I am not at my top game in this one. If you put the Iron Giant on the sidewalk of Seattle for 100 years, you would get my performance for this one. I would be a little rusty. So, hopefully enjoy my review of the movie Inspector Gadget. The thing was that Inspector Gadget was something I absolutely loved back in the 1980s. It had a kick-ass song, it had the amazing thing that the Inspector Gadget could do with all his, gadgets he had in his coat. I never really thought so much about the, idea behind Inspector Gadget, how he functioned, how he got his gadgets, and stuff like that. Just accepted it. Now, when in the late 90s I got the news that Disney was going to pour in $90 million. $90 million into a movie about Inspector Gadget, I was actually kind of hyped. Well, I was at least until I saw that Dr. Claw was going to be visible. That's a big no-no. And the second was when the first trailer hit. I figured after 2 seconds, I don't think it was anymore, 2 seconds, where I just realized, oh, so this is a bunch of bullshit. And then I actually saw the movie. And, I have one word for you. No, Gadget, no! Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, Gadget, no! Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, a little background may not hurt, I guess. Inspector Gadget was basically a kid-friendly version of RoboCop, you could say. And he would get these missions from Commissioner Quimby, or whatever he was, with his self-destructive messages who always blew up in the Commissioner's face, which was kind of funny. Because Dr. Claw, the most menacing villain in all of 80s cartoon, who was sitting in his lair with his cat and with his ominous voice. The case was basically some cartoonish nonsense, but the thing was that the organization MAD, which Dr. Claw ran, was gonna do something evil. The thing was that every case would be solved by Inspector Gadget, not because he was a good inspector or because he was smart or crafty or used his gadgets or stuff like that. It was basically, he never solved anything. He was a buffoon and an idiot. It was up to Penny, his niece, and the dog Brain, who basically solved the case for him, being very much smarter than him. But he was thinking that he had done it all along, and when Dr. Claw's plan would be foiled, he would yell, "Next time I'll get you, Gadget, next time." But the best part of it was the theme song. That was absolutely kick-ass and was one of the best intros ever in the 1980s cartoons, and that's saying something. So what's the plot of our actual movie? Well, Brown, aka Matthew Broderick, is a security guard at a research lab where they are trying to, research the thing about, replacing limbs and stuff like that. They discover that it is fueled not by the brain but by the heart, which will come into play later in a sappy and horrendously awfully written and directed and shot scene later, but never mind about that. Brenda's father gets killed, and the thing is stolen by our future Dr. Claw, played by Rupert Everett. Actually isn't called Dr. Claw, but has a claw at least. In pursuit of him, Brown gets KO'd completely by an exploding car, and he is basically sort of dead. But he is in a RoboCop-like reversed into, being Inspector Gadget. Being equipped with tons and tons and tons of stuff, which most of it is pretty stupid. Who needs 200 gallons of toothpaste in a hose to stop crime? I don't know. But nevertheless, it made for a not so funny gag. So this is basically the story of him battling not Dr. Claw. Well, that's about it. It's a pretty lame plot. What is the problem with this movie? Matthew Broderick is the first thing. They made him into almost a cybernetic life form, capable of doing everything except acting! My God, he is bad. He is really terrible. I have always had a big dislike for Matthew Broderick. I think it started with Godzilla, and I have hated him in almost everything he has done ever since. This isn't the worst thing he has ever done. This guy is... That's a lot of fish. And his absolute blandness and his terrible attempts at slapstick and physical comedy bombs terribly. This is a horribly written, horribly acted, amazingly awfully edited movie that, I'm sorry to say this, but doesn't work at all. There are the occasional odd jokes that actually works, but this never felt like a proper version of Inspector Gadget. It could have been done. The goofy tone of the movie and the atmosphere could have been transformed into a proper Inspector Gadget movie. It would have been funny, because there is a sequence when they stop and Inspector Gadget thinks that two escaped convicts who are trying to break into a car has actually locked themselves out of a car. And he's complete oblivious to this fact is a small glimmer. Just for a split second, I could see that the writing was there to make an Inspector Gadget movie. It was not amazingly funny, but it was funnier than most other stuff. It wasn't excellently edited or anything, but it just brought the small shard of what made Inspector Gadget an enjoyably dumb cartoon to begin with. Of course, about 30 seconds later it was all over, because they were back to being awful and all that stuff. Matthew Broderick also have a talking car, which is super annoying. And Dr. Claw. Oh dear. If they would have made a movie today about Dr. Claw, they probably would have get it closer to what he actually was, because he was menacing. He was sitting in that cave with a cat and, having his voice and stuff like that. Now he looks more like a fashion designer or a Wall Street broker or a douche with his awfully weak claw. For me, who watched a lot of Inspector Gadget back in the days, I was offended. I was super offended by having to watch an actual face of Dr. Claw, who wasn't even called Dr. Claw, but was only called Claw. There is glimmers of hope, though. This isn't a complete burial of this movie. I mean, if you're gonna talk terrible slapstick made by Disney in the late 1990s, Mr. Magoo makes this movie look like Life of Brian in comparison. And there are the odd occasional joke that actually works. And there are these odd occasional visual gags that actually got a chuckle out of me. And there are these small little side stories and small little side characters that actually was kind of enjoyable. I mean, it wasn't great or anything, but I went in with such low expectations. I actually expected this one to get a 1-digit grade. I didn't go quite so far, but the fact is that the movie does have a okay pacing. It is 78 minutes long, so at least the pain is over rather quickly, you could say. There's also a kind of a funny post-credit sequence with a lot of cameos playing themselves, which was kind of funny, but why is Mr. T there? Can somebody explain why Mr. T is in this movie as a henchman for some evildoers? He has never been that. He's BA! God damn it. Now, if you watched Inspector Gadget and really liked it, then don't watch this movie. This is terrible. If you've never heard of Inspector Gadget, this is not a movie you need to check out. There is nothing for you here. This is nothing that would interest you in the slightest, I think. It's not a very good movie. Matthew Broderick is absolutely awful. The script is terrible, the editing is beyond awful. This movie takes a mountain-sized shaped dump on its source material. It is a terribly acted, awfully scripted, awfully shot and woefully edited movie that has the occasional laughter and the occasional gags that works, and has a very reasonable runtime that will at least not make it so terrible that you will vomit over it or anything like that. But this movie gets the rating of 14. Now, I probably would have gone even lower if I wouldn't have such terrible expectations to it, from the get-going. And I don't think I'm being generous here. I'm thinking it has to do more with the fact that I expected this movie to be so awfully terrible that when it actually made a thing that I actually liked, I was kind of surprised. And, compared to other stuff I have seen in the same genre, it isn't as bad. So, I'll see you the next time, and the Wikstrand is signing out.